Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing yet another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from France. Although it's French, the majority of this film is spoken in the English language. Released in the year 2018, directed by Dominique Rocher, and this film is called The Night Eats the World. So The Night Eats the World is set in Paris. You've got this young man who's recently split up from his girlfriend. He wants to try and move on with his life, but before he can do that, he has to go to her apartment and pick up some belongings. So when he gets there this evening, he realises that there's a party going on, and the ex-girlfriend wants to introduce him to a few people. She says that she'll get his belongings, but just have a little bit of fun before you do that. So reluctantly he stays behind. He gets a little bit bored, so he goes into another room. He sits on a couch and he ends up falling to sleep. When he wakes up, he goes out of the room to find his ex-girlfriend, but to his horror, no one is around and there's blood all over the walls. And so he's trying to come to terms with what's going on. Whatever has happened has been catastrophic and it's starting to freak him out. But to his horror, he realizes that the whole of Paris has been overrun by flesh-eating zombies. Now these zombies are polluting the streets. He wants to know, is there any safe place to go to? But for the time being, he realised that the safest place is inside the complex, is that these zombies are outside and they're locked outside, but they're slowly gaining in numbers, and he's worried that they're going to crash through and get to him. So he's trying to fight off the outside presence, but unfortunately inside his own mind, the isolation is starting to have a negative effect on him, and he's starting to slowly lose his sanity. So not only does he have to fight a physical presence, but he also has to fight a psychological presence that threatens to destroy him from both sides. So whether or not it does is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on The Night Eats the World. I was very, very excited to see this film. I didn't really know anything about it, but the reason I was excited is because I'm such a fan of French horror. Now, between the year 2000 and 2010, French horror was the place to be if you were a horror fan. They were churning out brilliant stuff very, very frequently, and it was just really, really exciting. The French wave, the new wave of French horror, was just an absolute pleasure to watch. But after 2010, they really have dried up, and they've dried up to a point where I just think that they've lost the knack. They've lost that golden sort of quality that made them so great back in years previous. And so every now and then there is a recent horror film, but it just doesn't get you the way the films in the past did. And so that's been the biggest disappointment. But I do have hope that one day it's going to be resurrected and that there's going to be a new wave of French horror. And if there is, I'm going to be the happiest person in the world. So coming into The Night Eats the World, this is a zombie film. I was wondering where Dominique Rocher was going to take us in this subgenre, a subgenre that unfortunately is very lazy. Ever since George A. Romero started this subgenre, everybody is copying his style because his style is the most successful. So it's basically flogging a cash cow, and it's very, very lazy and generic. And so if you've seen one, you've seen them all. And so that to me is the biggest disappointment, because when it's done right, this can be some of the best horrors, because not only is it a physical horror, but it's a horror of the human psyche as well. And so The Night Eats the World, coming in with those expectations, I will say that I was a little bit disappointed, but I like the ambition that Dominique Rocher actually demonstrates in this film. This is a movie not so much about a zombie outbreak, but more about the human condition. This is a movie about what isolation will do to you, and that isolation is intensified through the way that Dominique Rocher uses the camera in this movie, and basically the lack of audio in this film. This movie is very silent. There are large parts of the film where nothing really happens, and that's emulating the boredom and the sense of isolation that this main character has. And you can start to sense the psychological torment that he's going through. He wants someone to exchange with. He wants, basically, he'll even have a pet. There's a scene where he actually tries to save a cat. And I thought that was very beautiful, but at the same time very desperate, because this is where this guy was at this part of time. And I thought, okay, well, he's starting to lose the plot. At the start of the film, he makes some decisions that I thought were very good. And I thought, all right, well, this is a guy I can really relate to. This is a guy that I could befriend. And where is he actually going to go? And the further the film goes, he starts to change into a different person, and this is basically a victim of his circumstances. He is a product of his environment, and this environment is a very harsh one. There is no noise. These zombies don't make a noise when they're running through the streets, and I thought that was a symbolism of this guy and his longing for a connection to anything. And so when the zombies aren't making noises, but they're actually still very ferocious in what they're doing, I just thought it creates that monotony that the film has, and the monotony is something that it's banking itself on, because it's showing you that isolation. It actually reminded me of a horror film called Mutants. Now, Mutants was a zombie/infected film, but that was a symbolic film about terminal illness, and about how you're coping with inevitable demise very, very soon, and how heartbreaking and how torturous that can be, not only for you, but also the person that you love. And I thought Mutants was a very hard-hitting zombie sort of film, and that's why it's one of my favourite. And so The Night Eats the World is a different type of zombie film, but it's a zombie film, once again, about the human condition and the psychology that isolation can bring. And so not only is he trying to fight the physical presence, but I thought the psychological presence was just as terrifying. And so he starts to make decisions that were really against the person that he was, but then you can kind of accept that because of what he's going through. So this is something that actually makes you think as a person, and makes you say to yourself, what would you do in this similar circumstance? Time and time again in this film, I was saying, what would I do here? What would I do there? So it actually made me think. The movie actually does absorb you to a point where you can put yourself into a situation and ask, what would I do? And so if a film can do that, it's definitely not a disaster. And I thought that the cinematography was very stale. As I said, the movie does have a strong sense of dullness to it. It basically has the happiness and the sort of the vibrant colouring sucked out of the film, and this is everything that it wants. And so I thought that Dominic Rocher does create an atmosphere to some degree that I thought for some parts of the film really work. I thought the movie had a beautiful ending, but at the same time a very haunting, so I say hauntingly beautiful ending, and it's complemented by a very beautiful score. And so the movie does have a strong sense of beauty. The movie does have a strong sense of art house kind of French European feel, where it's a movie that does rely on the senses, and it also has in the background a zombie sort of infected apocalyptic film. So if you want something like Day of the Dead, you're going to be disappointed with The Night Eats the World. But if you want something different and a very tired subgenre, then this is a movie that I would say at least go out there and see once. But the biggest problem with this film was in fact the monotony. Now yes, on one hand it does work because it does give you the insight into this man's mentality, and basically showing you the end of the world and how boring and terrifying that can be and how dull it is. But at the same time, I thought that it actually felt like a short film elongating itself to a feature. Therefore there was a lot of filler. There was a lot of scenes that I thought really didn't need to be there, but they were there just to make the runtime go to that 90-minute length. And so it does outstay its welcome, unfortunately, and there were a few occasions where I was actually looking at my watch wondering how long do I have to actually go through this film. And so for that was the biggest problem, is that yes, the monotony works, but in some areas at the start of the film the monotony works, but after a while you want something else to stimulate the mind. I didn't get enough insight into this person, who he was before this apocalypse happened. Yes, he's making decisions that make him relatable, but you don't relate to him based on the fact of his personality. And so yes, you can kind of say to yourself he was a good person, but who was he? You know, basically there's not enough information about him to make the monotony work. And so there is a lot of filler, and there is a lot of boredom to the film, and I know that that's the way that the director wanted to create this movie, and I can applaud him for trying something a little bit different, taking a little bit of a spin on this subgenre. But unfortunately it's a little bit ambitious, and that ambition doesn't work because, you know, art house kind of cinema can only work to some degree, and after a while you need something else. And so the mind doesn't get stimulated to a point where you can keep your attention from the first minute to the last. So overall, for The Night Eats the World, if you are after something a little bit different in a very tired subgenre, I would highly recommend you check this movie out. But you're not going to really want to watch it more than once, because it just doesn't have that lasting quality, and as a result of that, I'm going to give The Night Eats the World 2.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.